The sun was shining above the busy city streets. Expensive cars passed by. People walked quickly, dressed in the finest clothes. In the middle of this high-class world stood a woman who didn't quite fit in. Her name was Maya. She wore a plain dress, nothing fancy. Her shoes were old. Her hair was tied back simply. She looked like someone who didn't belong in the rich side of town. But she walked with calmness, her eyes full of quiet strength. Maya stepped into Lorraine, the most luxurious fashion store in the city. The floor sparkled. Soft music played. Perfume filled the air. The store was full of people buying expensive clothes and jewelry. As Maya entered, the atmosphere changed. The staff noticed her instantly. A young salesgirl whispered to another, "What is she doing here?" They both laughed quietly, not even trying to hide it. Maya looked around, admiring a beautiful red dress. It was displayed on a silver mannequin. It sparkled under the store lights. Her eyes softened as she walked toward it. But before she could touch it, a voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, ma'am," said a tall, sharp-looking woman with a fake smile. "That piece is quite expensive." Maya turned to her and smiled kindly. "Yes, I know. It's very beautiful." The woman's smile faded. She looked Maya up and down. "Are you sure you're in the right store? We don't allow window shoppers to handle high-end items." A few people nearby turned their heads. Some giggled. One even took out their phone. Maya felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply stepped back and nodded. "I understand," she said quietly. The woman smirked. "Good. We wouldn't want to damage anything." Maya gave the red dress one last look and turned away. She walked slowly out of the store, her hands shaking a little. Outside, the wind touched her face as she took a deep breath. She reached into her small purse and pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed a number. When the call connected, her voice was calm. It happened again. There was silence for a moment on the other end. Then came a voice, deep, steady, and cold. "Which store?" "Lorraine," she replied. A pause. "Go home," the voice said gently. "I'll take care of it." Maya hung up and looked back at the glass door of the store. Inside, the staff had already moved on, laughing with a rich customer. They had no idea what they had just done. They had insulted the wrong woman. That evening, as the city lights glowed and the luxury store closed its doors, a storm began to rise, not with fire or guns, but with silence, power, and precision. The man Maya had called was not an ordinary husband. His name was Zayn, and he was the hidden force behind some of the biggest companies in the country. He didn't wear suits often. He didn't post on social media. But when he moved, people listened. And now someone had disrespected his wife. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply turned on his computer and began. It was 2:00 a.m. The world was quiet, but Zayn was wide awake. The glow of his computer screen lit up his study room. His eyes didn't blink much. His face looked calm, but there was a fire inside him. A slow, burning fire. On the screen was the security footage from Lorraine. Zayn watched the video again and again. He saw Maya, his wife, walking in. He saw the laughter, the insults, the way they looked at her like she was nothing. He saw her soft smile and her silent pain. He paused the video on the moment Maya turned around. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. That broke him. He slowly leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Maya had always been kind. She never raised her voice, never disrespected anyone. Even when people hurt her, she never fought back. But she didn't need to. She had him. Zayn picked up his phone and made a call. A sleepy voice answered, "Sir, it's late. I want full ownership data on Lorraine," Zayn said. "Yes, sir. I'll start right away. Get me everything. Parent company, investors, shareholders, all of it. And keep it quiet." "Yes, sir." He hung up and stared at the screen again. "This isn't about a dress," he whispered. "This is about dignity." By morning, his team had sent a full report. Lorraine was owned by a holding company called Velian Group, a giant in luxury fashion and real estate. It had international stores, private investors, and public shares. Zayn didn't blink. He already knew the name. What surprised him wasn't who owned the company, but how weak their current share structure was. "If I buy 22%, he said to his advisor later that day, "I can influence their board. If I buy 38%, I own them." His advisor frowned. "It's possible, but expensive." Zayn gave a small smile. "I'm not asking for the price. I'm asking for the timeline." Over the next week, Zayn quietly moved like a shadow. Through different companies, he bought shares. He contacted silent investors. He offered better deals to people already inside the system. Money moved. People listened. And still, no one at Lorraine had any idea. In fact, the same manager who had insulted Maya had just gotten a bonus for keeping the store clean of low-income traffic. She laughed with her team. "No poor dressers allowed," she joked. "This isn't charity." The others laughed with her. If only they knew who they had kicked out. Meanwhile, Maya stayed quiet. She didn't ask questions. She didn't want revenge. But inside her, something had changed. She wasn't angry. She was disappointed. All her life, she had believed people should be treated equally. Money or no money. Expensive clothes or simple dress. She had never wanted to feel above anyone, but that day in the store made her feel beneath everyone. And that pain, Zayn could never forget. That's why he wasn't just trying to punish the store. He wanted to change something. 2 weeks later, Zayn sat in a boardroom. Across from him were 5 men in suits, members of Velian Group's board. None of them knew who he was. He smiled and introduced himself as a new investor who now owned 42% of their company. They froze. One of them dropped his pen. "You? What?" "I'm not here to fight," Zayn said. "I'm here to guide." They tried to laugh it off. They offered him coffee. One offered to talk privately later to make a deal. Zayn stood. "Let me make this simple," he said. "You can either make the changes I suggest, or I become the new CEO and make them myself." That evening, back at home, Maya was watering the plants on their balcony. The air was cool, and the sky was pink with sunset. Zayn stepped out and handed her a small envelope. She looked at him, confused. "What's this?" He said nothing. Inside was a VIP invitation to Lorraine's private event. Her name was on it. Bold. Gold-printed. But why? "You're going to visit again," Zayn said softly. "And this time, I want you to wear whatever you want. Doesn't matter if it's old or new." Maya looked at him, still unsure. He kissed her forehead. "You don't have to prove anything to them. Just walk in. That's enough." 2 days later, Maya stood again in front of Lorraine. Same old dress. Same soft smile. But something was different now. She walked in. The staff noticed her again, but something in their eyes changed. The manager's face paled. She whispered to another girl, "Is that her?" The security guard at the door saluted Maya politely. A man in a suit rushed forward, nervous. "Ma'am, welcome. Please, this way." Customers turned to look. Some even moved aside to let her pass. But Maya walked calmly to the same red dress. It was still there, sparkling, untouched. She looked at it again, just like the first time. The manager came running. "And ma'am, I am so sorry about." 1 year later, the world had changed in ways no one expected. What began with one woman being insulted in a luxury store had become a movement, bigger than fashion, bigger than business. It had become a voice for the unheard, a light for the forgotten, and a symbol for those who had lost their self-worth. The brand Real was not just selling clothes anymore. It was selling respect. Zayan and Maya sat together on a quiet evening, watching the news. The anchor spoke with energy. From just one factory to now over 70 across the world, Real is becoming more than a brand. It's becoming a belief. Maya smiled softly. I still remember the day they told me I didn't belong in that store, she whispered. Zayan looked at her with gentle pride. And now you own a chain of stores, he said. Funny how life works. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about using pain to build something powerful. In one part of the world, a young girl named Sana stood in front of a Real store window. She had scars on her hands, marks from years of hard work in factories where no one cared. But that day, she wore a Real uniform. That day, she was not a worker. She was a designer. Sana had sent her sketches to Real through their Design from the Heart program, created by Maya to find talent from villages and poor areas. And her dress? It was now in the main showroom in London. In another country, a woman named Angela, who had once been homeless, now managed an entire Real warehouse. When people asked her how she got there, she would say, "One video, one woman in a store. She made me believe I was worth something again." The Real brand also started a respect fund. 10% of every sale went toward women's education, skill development for underprivileged youth, free mental health services for struggling workers. Zayan didn't just want to change business. He wanted to change lives. And Maya, she gave speeches around the world about dignity, identity, and rising after insult. Everywhere she went, people clapped. Not because she was rich, but because she was real. But not everyone had moved on. The old luxury store where everything began. It was still there. But the lights were dim. The walls were cracked. People had stopped going. Newspapers called it a symbol of arrogance that couldn't evolve. The CEO, Mr. Michael, had resigned quietly months ago. No one talked about him anymore, except for one small line in a business article. The fall of a brand that forgot people matter more than price tags. One day, Maya received a letter. It was handwritten, old school, and full of emotion. Dear Maya, I was one of the employees who stood silent that day in the store. I should have spoken up. I didn't, and I regret it every day. But I wanted you to know, you gave people like me courage. Because of you, I stood up for a customer last week when my manager was rude. I lost my job, but I found my voice. Thank you for being the woman who didn't fight back with anger, but with purpose. Maya cried when she read it. Not from sadness, but from knowing she had changed someone's life without even knowing it. To celebrate 1 year, Real held an event called The Day That Changed Us. Thousands came, from all countries, from all stories. On the stage, Zayan spoke first. It started with a dress, but it ended with a discovery that people don't want to feel rich. They want to feel respected. Then Maya walked up. Silence fell. And she said, they thought they insulted a woman in silence. But that silence was just the beginning of our loudest voice. The crowd stood. They clapped. Some cried, because everyone in that room had felt unseen at some point in life. And that day, they felt seen. Zayan and Maya walked off stage and looked around. Children laughed near the food stalls. A group of factory workers danced. Women in high jibs, saris, suits, and jeans stood together, proud of who they were. No judgment, no levels, only equality. Zayan whispered to Maya, we didn't build a brand. We built a bridge. She nodded, and together, they walked into the future. The next morning, chaos broke out inside the headquarters of Velian Group. Emails flew. Phones rang nonstop. Managers panicked. Department heads rushed into emergency meetings. One name echoed through the halls like thunder. Maya Zayan. The staff at Lorraine had finally learned the truth. The simple woman they laughed at was not just a customer. She was now part owner of the entire brand. But the news didn't stop there. Inside a glass office, a legal team sat with thick folders in front of them. Zayn stood across from them, calm but cold. "Start from the beginning," he said. One lawyer, a middle-aged man with gray hair and tired eyes, looked nervous. "We found things you won't like, sir." Zayn nodded. "Tell me anyway." They opened the files. Behind the beauty of Lorraine, behind the polished walls and gold lights, was a dark system. Workers in small factories, mostly women, were making the same expensive dresses Maya had once admired. But they weren't paid fairly. Some worked 14 hours a day for very little money. Others had injuries but kept working in fear of losing their jobs. Worst of all, some of the workers were underage girls. Zayn clenched his jaw. "Are there records?" The lawyer nodded. "Yes, hidden behind fake contracts. But we traced everything." Zayn turned away and stared out the window. The city looked peaceful from above. But down in the shadows, people were suffering, so that others could wear glitter and shine. And the company had covered it all. Back at home, Maya sat in the garden with a warm cup of tea. She knew Zayn was working on something, but she didn't ask. She trusted him. Always had. What she didn't know was that this fight was no longer just about her. Zayn had seen enough. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was war. That evening, Zayn called a meeting with the entire board of directors. Some were angry. Some were scared. A few still tried to smile, hoping he'd go away. Zayn walked in silently. He placed the folder on the table and opened it slowly. "I wanted to give you all a chance," he said. "But now I see. This brand is sick. And the disease starts at the top." One man laughed nervously. "Come on, it's just business." Zayn snapped the folder shut. "No, it's cruelty. It's greed. It's slavery in a pretty dress." He turned to the projector and clicked a button. Photos filled the screen. Photos of factories. Photos of children. Photos of bruised hands and long shifts. Silence fell over the room. Zayn looked at every face in the room. "These people make your luxury, but they don't even have clean water." One woman tried to defend herself. "We didn't know." "You did," he said coldly. "You just didn't care." By the next morning, a plan was in place. Zayn had already called a press conference. He didn't hide behind lawyers or PR teams. He stood in front of the media with Maya beside him. She wore the same plain dress. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. "My wife was insulted because of her clothes," Zayn said. "But what we found inside this company is far worse than rudeness." He opened the same folder and showed the world the truth. "We are cleaning this from the roots," he said. "Effective today, all child labor is banned. All factory workers will be paid double. Health benefits, safety checks, and education programs for their children will begin immediately." Reporters began to whisper. One raised her hand. "Is this because of what happened to your wife?" Zayn smiled faintly. "This is because no one deserves to be treated like garbage. Not my wife. Not a child in a factory. Not anyone." Online, the story exploded. "Wife insulted. Husband destroys luxury empire with truth." The dress that changed the fashion industry. From humiliation to revolution. Maya's story. People shared the video across social media. Millions watched. Celebrities praised the move. Human rights groups thanked Zayn. Factory workers cried with joy. But not everyone was happy. Inside the old leadership circle of Lorraine, a few powerful people were furious. They had lost money, power, and control. One man, in a dark corner office, slammed his hand on the table. "We need to push back. Destroy his image. Make him look like a liar." Another nodded. "Let's dig into his past. Find something dirty." They started making calls, whispering into media ears, trying to twist the story. But they didn't realize one thing. Zayn didn't fear dirt, because he had nothing to hide. At home, Maya watched the news. She saw the photos of smiling workers, now given hope. She saw people cheering in the streets. She turned to Zayn, eyes full of emotion. "You didn't have to do all this for me." Zayn took her hand. "I didn't do this for you," he said gently. "I did it because of you." "You didn't just protect your family," she whispered. "You protected truth." He smiled, tired but proud. "No," he said softly. "We did." In just weeks, the storm had turned. What began as a public shaming of a woman in a store had turned into a movement. Not just about clothes, not just about wealth, but about respect, honor, and the power of one voice refusing to stay silent. The world had watched Zayn fight back. They had seen him protect his wife, defend his family, and expose the dark truths of the rich and powerful. Now, people waited. What would Zayn do next? Would he disappear like the others? Would he take his victory and walk away? But Zayn had never been that kind of man. He didn't want revenge. He wanted change. Real change. He called a press conference. Maya stood beside him, holding his hand tightly as thousands of cameras turned to him. The world watched from every screen. Zayn stood in front of the microphone, calm and firm. "I didn't plan to become a face of any movement," he said. "All I wanted was a simple life, with respect. My wife was insulted because someone thought she didn't look rich enough. They judged her by her clothes, not her kindness, her heart, or her strength." He paused. The crowd was silent. But what they didn't know, Zayn continued, was that the woman they insulted was the spark that lit a fire. He took a deep breath and looked around. And now, that fire is not just burning. It's clearing the ground for something new. Zayn made his announcement. He would open a new luxury brand. But this one would be different. No hidden factories, no child labor, no fake marketing. The brand would be called Real. Simple name, deep meaning. Every product would have a story. Who made it? Where it came from? How the workers were treated? And more than that, 10% of profits would go to women-run businesses and education projects in poor areas. Luxury should never look down on anyone, Zayn said. Luxury should lift people up. At first, the old companies laughed. They said, "This is just emotional talk. It won't work." But they were wrong. Within 5 days of Zayn's announcement, the waiting list for Real had crossed 100,000 names. People didn't want to buy brands anymore. They wanted to buy truth. They wanted to feel seen. When Real finally launched, it broke every record. In just 1 week, it became the most talked about brand on social media. Celebrities wore it. Young students wore it. Even factory workers bought one item because it meant something. Maya received thousands of letters. One girl wrote, "When I saw what they did to you, I cried. I've been treated like that too, but you gave me hope." Another said, "You made me feel like I matter." Maya cried when she read them. She had never imagined that her quiet pain in a store would turn into a movement. But Zayn always knew. People are ready for something better, he told her. They just needed someone to start. But success brought danger too. Some of the old luxury brands were collapsing. Investors pulled out. Stock prices fell. And people started calling for big changes in the industry. One fashion CEO was forced to resign. Another company was caught destroying unsold clothes and faced public anger. The powerful old men who once ruled the industry were now hiding. Some were in legal trouble. Some were banned from international trade. Meanwhile, Zayn's new company opened a factory with open doors. Anyone could walk in, meet the workers, see how things were made. It was clean, bright, safe. The workers smiled. Some even cried, because it was the first time they were treated with dignity. Zayn gave every employee a share in the company. "This is not just mine," he said. "This is ours." One evening, as the sun set behind their home, Zayn and Maya sat together on the balcony. She looked at him with quiet pride. "You changed everything," she whispered. Zayn smiled. "No," he said softly. "You did. They insulted the wrong woman. And because of that, the world opened its eyes." Maya laughed gently. "So this is how change happens." Zayn nodded. One moment, one voice, one choice. A few days later, a special ceremony was held in the city. The mayor, the media, and hundreds of guests were present. Maya was invited on stage. She was given the Courage and Honor Medal for speaking out when others stayed silent. Tears filled her eyes as the crowd clapped for minutes. She stood there, not just as a woman who had been insulted, but as a symbol of strength. That night, Zayn released a final video. It was only 3 minutes long, but it broke the internet. In the video, he said, "To every person who has been looked down on, judged by their appearance, or treated as less than, you are not invisible. You are not weak, and you are not alone anymore. The old world is ending. Let's build something better." Zayn had won the public's heart, but in the shadows, enemies were waking up. Inside a cold, sleek office far from the city, 4 powerful men sat around a dark glass table. They wore expensive suits. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were full of anger. "He humiliated us in front of the world," one of them growled. "He exposed everything," said another, "and people are calling him a hero." "Worse," the third added, "he's changing the game. If other brands follow his example, we lose control." The leader at the head of the table finally spoke. "Then we take him down." Back in the city, Maya and Zayn thought the worst was over. They were wrong. It started slowly. Rumors online, strange news articles, headlines that made no sense. Zayn involved in shady land deal. Former employees speak out. Was he always this clean? Luxury hero or hidden tyrant? Maya read the articles, confused and hurt. "These are lies," she whispered. Zayn stayed calm. "This is what they do when they can't win with truth. They throw dirt and hope something sticks." But it didn't stop there. One day, as Maya stepped out of a charity meeting, a reporter shoved a mic in her face. "Mrs. Zayn, is it true your husband once bankrupted a village for profit?" Her heart stopped. She didn't reply. She just walked to her car with shaking hands. Inside, she sat silently. For the first time since everything started, she looked scared. That night, Maya confronted Zayn. "Tell me," she said softly, "did you ever do something wrong? Something they can use?" Zayn looked into her eyes. "No," he said, "but they'll invent anything if it means turning the world against us." She nodded, trusting him. But inside, the pressure was growing. Zayn was fighting a war now, not with money, but with reputation, truth, and powerful enemies who had no rules. The next week was worse. One of Zayn's old business partners suddenly accused him of fraud. A fake video appeared online, showing a man who looked like Zayn yelling at workers. Even though the video was fake, people believed it. Stock prices for Gullion Group began to fall. Influencers who once supported the reforms suddenly went silent. Some news channels flipped, calling Zayn unstable, a danger to luxury markets. Even some board members turned against him, whispering about selling their shares. The empire was shaking, and this time, not because of Zayn's strength, but because of the enemy's lies. Meanwhile, Maya felt helpless. She had started this journey just wanting a dress. Now, her husband was being attacked from every direction. One morning, she woke up and found Zayn in his study, surrounded by documents, coffee cups, and dark circles under his eyes. "You haven't slept," she whispered. "I can't afford to sleep," he said. "Not while they're trying to destroy everything." She sat beside him and held his hand. "You're not alone in this." Zayn smiled, weak but grateful. But Maya had made a decision. She wouldn't just sit and watch anymore. That evening, she did something unexpected. She turned on her phone. She opened a live video. And she told her story. No media spin. No reporters. Just Maya. "My name is Maya Zion," she said, sitting in her garden. "And I want to tell you what really happened." She told the world about the store, the humiliation, the dress. She told them how her husband didn't use violence or revenge, but truth and justice. She showed old pictures of the factories now improved, and messages from workers who were finally safe. And then her voice shook. "They're attacking him now, calling him evil, trying to silence him. But I know the truth." She wiped a tear. "He stood up because I couldn't. He spoke because I was hurt. He fought for people he never even met." The video went viral within hours. People shared it, cried with it, stood with it. Even those who had doubted Zion paused and listened. But the enemies weren't done. The men in the shadowy boardroom were furious. She flipped the story again. One shouted, "This woman is a problem." Another said, "Maybe we need to handle her too." The leader raised a hand. "No, we go deeper. We destroy them both." Back at home, Zion received a call from an old friend in the media industry. "They're planning something," the friend warned. "Worse than before. Something big. They're digging into your family, your past, everything." Zion's eyes hardened. He turned to Maya. "We need to be ready." In the dark world of power and control, truth was never enough. But something had changed. Now, Zion and Maya weren't just fighting back. They were becoming symbols of a much bigger war. One that had spread beyond luxury, beyond fashion. This was about honor, about dignity, about standing when the world tries to push you down. Zion stood in silence, staring at the wall in his office. The call had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. "They're digging into your family, your past, everything." The warning echoed in his mind. This wasn't about a brand anymore. This wasn't about pride. This was about survival. The next morning, it began. A new headline exploded across social media. Zion's father once accused of tax fraud. Like father, like son. Shocking allegations surface about Maya's family ties. The stories were cruel and fake, but they were everywhere. News channels picked them up. Talk shows invited experts who nodded seriously and said, "Where there's smoke, there's fire." Even Zion's little niece was followed by paparazzi outside her school. Zion's mother, an old, quiet woman who lived a peaceful life, called him in tears. "I never wanted this," she whispered. "I just wanted you to do good." Zion's fists clenched. They had crossed a line. They didn't just want to break his image. They wanted to break his soul. But Zion was not a man who sat still when attacked. He had seen the betrayal coming. Months ago, even before Maya's video went viral, he had quietly begun to collect evidence. Old emails, secret recordings, deals made in dark corners by the very same people who now attacked him. He hadn't wanted to use them. He believed in clean business. But now they had come after his family. The rules had changed. Zion called a private meeting. Only 5 people were invited, his most trusted allies: a lawyer, a digital expert, a media strategist, a security chief, and Maya. They sat around the table, listening as Zion laid out the plan. "We fight them with truth," he said, "but not just words. We show what they've done, not to me, but to workers, to the poor, to the public who trusted them." The digital expert leaned forward. "Are you sure you want to go this far?" Zion didn't blink. "They went after my mother." Maya sat beside him, her hands folded, but her eyes sharp. "They wanted war," she said quietly. "Now they'll see what war really looks like." Operation Clear Sky began that night. Zion's team launched a website full of documents, videos, and whistleblower statements. each one connected to a company secretly run by the four men from the shadow boardroom. Illegal dumping in rivers, child labor in overseas factories, hidden taxes stolen from poor countries. Within hours, hashtags exploded on social media. Hashtag luxurialize. Hashtag real faces behind the brands. Hashtag Zayn was right. People were shocked. The enemies who had accused Zayn of being corrupt were now being exposed as monsters. News anchors couldn't ignore it anymore. One even said on live TV, "Looks like the lion they tried to trap was watching them the whole time." But the war wasn't over. The four men were angry now. Really angry. They pushed back harder, offering media channels huge money to spin the story. A new video came out, heavily edited, trying to make Zayn look violent during a factory visit. But this time, people weren't so quick to believe. Comments under the video said, "This is clearly fake. They're trying too hard now." Zayn exposed them. That's why they hate him. Public support had turned into a wave. One evening, outside Zayn's company, people began to gather. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, holding signs. Truth wins. We stand with Zayn. Respect starts with justice. Maya watched from the window, her heart full. From one insult in a store to a national movement for dignity. Zayn came beside her. "Are you scared?" he asked. She shook her head. Not anymore. But the enemy still had one card left, and it was their darkest one yet. Late one night, Zayn received a private video message. It showed his head of security tied to a chair, beaten and bloodied. A voice spoke behind the camera. "You've caused us enough damage. Stop now, or your people will disappear." One by one, Zayn's blood turned cold. He knew the game had changed again. This was no longer about business. This was criminal. But even then, Zayn did not bend. He called the police. He contacted international media. And most of all, he released the video. He showed the world exactly what his enemies had become. Terrorists in suits. Cowards behind luxury. The world gasped. The companies behind the four men started losing investors. The police launched investigations. Interpol got involved. One of the four men tried to flee the country. He was arrested at the airport. The others went into hiding. Back in their home, Maya hugged Zayn. The world celebrated. Zayn's brand reel had changed everything. Maya had become a symbol of strength. Old companies had fallen, and new hope had risen. But in the middle of light, there was still darkness. A shadow, a secret, a storm waiting to break. And it came from someone Zayn once trusted. His name was Rafay. Zayn had known him since college. They started businesses together, worked late nights, built dreams brick by brick. But when Zayn stepped into the spotlight, Rafay stepped into jealousy. He smiled in front of cameras. But behind closed doors, he was angry. How can Zayn become the hero? He thought. I worked just as hard. Why is his wife the face of this movement? What about me? That jealousy turned into something worse. Rafay began digging. Old files, financial records, emails, and documents. He wanted to find anything to bring Zayn down. And finally, he found something. A document. From 10 years ago. A legal paper Zayn had signed, not knowing it had a hidden clause. A small mistake, but one that gave Rafay access to certain assets under Zayn's name. And Rafay saw his chance. One morning, Zayn woke up to news that shook the world. Real brand assets frozen due to internal ownership dispute. Maya rushed into his office with her phone in hand. "Zayn, they're saying you don't fully own Real." Zayn's heart stopped. "That's not possible," he said. "I built this with my own hands." But the documents said otherwise. Rafay had filed a case, claiming that 51% of the company belonged to him. If it was true, Rafay could destroy everything. Media channels exploded with the story. Was the hero not so honest after all? Is the real brand based on fake ownership? Zayn's partner breaks silence, calls him a liar. People were confused. Some were angry. Some stood with Zayn. Others walked away. Investors pulled out. Stores closed. Workers panicked. Zayn watched the company he built for truth fall apart. And Rafay smiled in silence. But Maya wasn't going to let it end like this. "We didn't come this far to lose now," she told Zayn. He looked at her, broken, tired. "I don't want to fight anymore," he whispered. "I just wanted to do good." Maya held his hand. "That's why you have to fight," she said, "because you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for every person who believed in you." Zayn took a deep breath, and he stood up. The next day, Zayn held another press conference. But this time, he didn't speak from a stage. He sat in a simple chair in the middle of his factory, surrounded by workers. He looked into the camera and said, "Yes, years ago, I signed something I didn't understand. I was young. I was careless. That's my mistake. But Real was built by honest hands, kind hearts, and a powerful purpose. And no lie, no trick will take that away." He paused. "I am ready to lose everything, but I will never lose who I am." The video went viral. Again. Then, something unexpected happened. One of Rafay's former assistants came forward. She posted a video of her own. In it, she shared how Rafay had planned the attack months ago. She showed screenshots, audio recordings, even emails where Rafay admitted he didn't care about the brand or the people. "I just want the money," he had said in one message. That video destroyed Rafay's plan in one day. The court dismissed his claim. Zayn was declared the true and only owner of Real. The company reopened. People returned. And Rafay, he disappeared. Some said he moved to another country. Others said he lost everything in a single week. But Zayn didn't celebrate his fall. He said just one thing: "May he find peace, because I have." The final days of the fight taught Zayn the greatest lesson of all. Success is not about the money, or the media, or even the praise. It's about who you are when the lights go off. It's about what you stand for when no one claps. It's about truth. Maya stood beside him as the factory lights turned on again. The workers clapped. Children ran through the open doors, smiling. Music played in the distance. And Zayn whispered to Maya, "They insulted you once, but they gave birth to something bigger than both of us." The Real brand didn't just survive. It grew stronger. A year later, they opened stores in 15 countries, and every store had one message written on the wall: "Luxury means respect." And under that line was Maya's photo, wearing the same dress from that terrible day. Smiling, Maya raised her hand gently. "It's okay." The woman paused. "I just came to look," Maya said. "That's all I wanted last time too." Then she took a card from her purse and handed it to the woman. The woman read it and turned pale. "Maya Zayn, primary owner, Velian Group." Maya turned and walked out. No anger, no shouting, just peace. Behind her, the entire store stood frozen. They hadn't just insulted a customer. They had insulted the woman who now owned their brand.